defined as the comparative analysis of impacts. But that's a bunch of debate jargon. So what does that actually mean? Well, for starters, an impact is whatever results from your argument. I like to think of it as the so what of the debate. It should always answer the question, why does your argument matter? So let's look at an example. The motion here is this House as the U.S. federal government would give each child a free laptop. So let's say on Gov that we're arguing that if everybody has a free laptop, they have equal access to the internet, which means that they'll have a better education. And the impact here is that eventually they can get higher paying jobs. And on Op, we're arguing that this would cost a lot of money and that the government would go into debt and that would trigger a US recession. So as you see here, the impacts are the final two boxes, the ones to the left and the right of the white arrow. So remember, weighing is about telling the judge that your impacts are more important than your opponent's impacts. So let's pretend for a minute that we're on Gov. We can say two things about our impact, which is that kids can get higher paying jobs when they grow up. The first thing that we can say is that education is permanent, whereas a recession is not. And since ours has a longer term of an impact, it's more important. The second thing that we can say is that it's extremely probable that kids will get higher paying jobs, but not very probable that we'll have a recession. So essentially here what we're saying is that our impact is more probable and therefore it's more important. You might not have realized it, but in this exercise we just weighed in two separate ways. The first way is by time frame. This is a way that you say that my impact is more important because it has a longer time span. The second way is on probability. We said that our impact was more important because it was more probable. So now let's pretend that we're on Op. We have to advocate for why triggering a US recession would be really bad. So there are two basic things that we can say. Number one, a US recession could trigger a global recession, which would affect almost every person on Earth. And number two, a recession could cause abject poverty, which is devastating and horrible. So again, we've weighed in two separate ways. The first was by scope, which is a fancy word that means that if your impact affects more people, then it's more important. The second way was through magnitude, which is again another fancy word to say that if your impact is more severe, it's more important. So let's do a bit of a review. Number one, we covered time frame. If an impact is long-term, that means it's more important. Number two, we covered probability. If an impact is more probable, that means that it's more important. Number three, we covered scope, which says that if an impact affects more people, then it's more important. And number four, we learned about magnitude, which says that if an impact is more severe, then it's more important. So finally, you may have heard of something called a framework. A framework is the way that the judge should weigh the round. It's also called a weighing mechanism. That might be a bit confusing, so I'll give an example. The most common type of framework is called utilitarianism or util. Utilitarianism is the belief that the right thing to do is the thing that provides the most good for the most people. So if the framework is util, then the judge will give the round to whichever team provides the most good for the most people. Another type of framework is called deontology. This just means that we should do whatever is quote-unquote ethical. Deontology says that there are some actions that we just shouldn't take because they're inherently immoral. There are a few other types of frameworks, but these are really the only two that you actually need to know. And if you're ever confused about which framework you should choose, just remember this saying: util is truetil. Util is useful in almost every single round, and it's pretty much always going to be the framework that you use or encounter. It's good for almost every single debate case. You should provide a framework at the beginning of your case right after you propose definitions if you're on Gov. So you can just say something like, Judge, for this debate, we believe that we should weigh the round based off of utilitarianism, and so whichever side provides the most good for the most people should win the debate.